Okay, hi. So, I kind of wanted to spend this video, since it is now like almost the end of June, reflecting on my reading year so far. And I've kind of wanted to do this because I've been reflecting on it just, I think, a bit more generally than I usually do, because I kind of made the decision at the beginning of the year that this was going to be my mood reading year, where I was going to try as much as possible to um, remove exterior influences from my reading and really just read things that I am interested in the moment, which is, I guess, what we call mood reading here. I think what's interesting about mood reading, and this is going to be a rambly type of video, is that when I think of people talking about mood reading, it seems like it's like more in the moment. Like, I'm in the mood for this specific book in the moment, and your mood can kind of sway pretty rapidly. I think, been reflecting on my mood reading in that my moods kind of shift in like larger swaths of time. So I was looking at the stats, because I keep stats on all the books I read, and like, as an example, usually at least a quarter of my reading every year is contemporaries. And a lot of the time those are more literary contemporary novels. And I have not read a single contemporary novel in all of 2023. And I don't think that's because in the past I've forced myself to read those. I think I've just been in much more of a consistent mood to read a certain type of book, which at this point in time has been fantasy. But even in the past, I've had years where I've read a decent amount of romance, and I have not picked up a single romance book this year, with the exception of fan fiction. So I kind of wanted to reflect on my reading year and like how it's been treating me to just kind of like mood read, and kind of go from there. So I started off January kind of in a fan fiction kick still, because I got into fan fiction in December of 2022, and I have specifically only read Harry Potter fan fiction for Draco and Hermione, so that ship. And that was a ton of my reading at the beginning of the year, which has tapered off fairly dramatically. But I was also just doing a ton of comfort reading at the beginning of the year, which is very uncommon for me. So the fan fiction, because it was with characters that I already know and in a world that I'm already familiar with, I kind of consider that to be like a bit more of a comfort read. I also reread multiple series, so I reread that series at the end of 2022, moving into 2023, and then I reread the Hunger Games series as well, and then watched those movies, which I also don't do very frequently. That was like the majority of January going into February. But I was also consistently reading much more fantasy. So I have been reading The Realm of the Elderling with Mariana at Mariana Mas Books. We read the Farseer trilogy last summer, fall time. And then we took a few months off, I think, and then we jumped straight in January. And we've basically consistently been reading since then. So we've read 6 books together at this point this year, and they are chunky books. Like, these are anywhere from I want to say 500 to 900 pages long, and I've been loving every minute of it. I think that something that has come up with mood reading is that I've been reading a lot more fantasy, and most people I interact with in the bookish community don't really read as much fantasy. And I think it's quite interesting to consider, because I think that a lot of people that I follow and that I interact with read a lot of literary fiction. I don't know, sometimes I feel like fantasy gets this bad reputation for not being literary. And I don't know how you could read The Realm of the Elderling and not take away that it is at its heart a literary fantasy. The writing is just very beautiful. The prose are beautiful. There is such a deep focus on characters and character relationships. I think that something that Robin Hobb really thrives in is making relationships between characters come to life, not just the character themselves. I think it's just so fascinating how you can see these like characters through the different lenses of how they convey themselves to different people, which is how all of us interact with the world. You know, you're not the same person that you are, or usually, to your parent, to your lover, to your in like the public sphere, when you go to get groceries, when you go to work. And I think that that's something that that Robin Hobb does a really excels at. Another thing that I think that The Realm of the Elderling has is it's this huge series, made up of a bunch of different series, but each of these series kind of speaks to this larger thematic context of what's happening in the world. But then you have just a lot of themes that she has you consider. You see lots of morally gray characters. I think that in the Live Ship Trader series especially, you have these morally gray characters that you follow, and they kind of exist on this gradient. And for me personally, in that series, there's just one character that you know is bad, but I personally couldn't help but like, and it was almost how far could she take him until I thought he was a bad person. And it took quite a bit because I was, justifying this character's actions through time, because a lot of the time he did the right thing for the wrong reasons. There's just a lot of themes around family, themes of fate, and kind of humanity, and is humanity a good thing? And then you see that through the context of, I guess, the world at large, and these fated elements with prophets and catalysts, and the things that they're bringing into the world. Oh, you also see it in terms of how different societies kind of interact with each other, and you get to see the different societies in an intimate manner, and then you get to see the society and how it views other societies that you already have an intimate understanding of, and the divides that exist because there's misunderstandings between each other. So there's just a lot of what she is doing that you can kind of see and take and move into the world that we exist in, but it exists in a fantasy space. And then there's also the use of magic systems that gain you power, magic systems that make you a public enemy. And there's, tonally you can kind of relate those to different things that society does and doesn't accept in real life. So that was kind of a long-winded rant on those, but I guess that's just to say that diving really deep into this world, diving into these characters, having someone like Mariana to talk to about it, it's honestly just been quite a wonderful experience because there's so many things to parse out. There are so many things to consider. There are so many things to talk about. We have spent hours talking about these books, literal hours, dissecting these books together, dissecting motives, dissecting themes, and intentions of the author. So overall, that's been a pretty major part of my reading for the year, and has been just very enjoyable. Another thing that I've noticed in my reading is that I've been consistently kind of reading the same authors. So some of that is because I'm reading more series. So for Robin Hobb in the year 2023, I've read 7 books. I've read 2 trilogies, and I've read a novella. So then I've been reading a lot of Brandon Sanderson because this is the year of Sanderson. He has his 4 secret novels that are coming out. 2 of them have come out so far. I have read both of those. I'm also diving into the Mistborn era too. I've read 2 of those, and I'm really enjoying them. And then I think I plan on reading his YA series this year, which will be 4 books long, with the last one coming out in November. So been reading a lot of Robin Hobb, been reading a lot of Brandon Sanderson, both fantasy authors. I've also read 2 R.F. Kuang books. She is also known as a fantasy author as well, though these books specifically are more diving into I would say like a low fantasy, like they exist in the real world. So I read Babel. I really enjoyed that. That's like much more of a historical fiction that happens to have magic in it, though magic is kind of a heart of the novel. Really interesting themes around colonialism, colorism, and just kind of conveying colonialism via language and magic, and kind of the stealing of language, or the appropriation of language. Just a really kind of interesting critique on colonialism, using magic as the guiding force of that. Another one I read is Yellowface that just came out. That is not fantasy, though it does have horror. Though it does have horror elements, and it's very satirical in nature. I thought it was like a really interesting shift for her in her kind of writing trajectory. I'll talk more about that book in my June wrap-up. It kind of edged a little too much for me on being too meta, but it's still quite an interesting divergence for her as an author. I have read her Poppy War trilogy when that first came out. And then, interestingly, I've been trying to kind of push nonfiction a bit more into my reading. Nonfiction is not really something I pick up because I'm in the mood to read it. It doesn't really count as mood reading, but I'm interested in acquiring more knowledge, so I kind of just like loop things in. But I haven't really totally enjoyed either nonfiction I've picked up this year. So I'm hoping things that I pick up later in the year I will find more interesting. I'm gravitating more towards like niche books. So like one of them that I read, one of my big problems with it was just like the general lack of information. So it was trying to like, the book could have been a lot shorter for the actual information in that area that the author had, or that really exists in the world. Overall, though, I think for the year, I've read a lot less than I usually do, or that I guess I have for the past like 5 years. I've just been a lot more, I've had a lot of other things going on in my personal life. I bought a house, so I've been doing a lot of work around my house. And sometimes I listen to an audiobook, but a lot of the time I've just been kind of diving into like non-booktube YouTube channels and listening to more like long-form documentary style things. And sometimes honestly just needing a break from stimulus. I've painted a lot of my house, and it's been nice sometimes to just have nothing going and just paint in silence, and kind of just exist in the moment. But overall, I think it's just interesting how my mood reading has generally just led to a lot more fantasy. I think I've just been gravitating away from things that exist in real life. Even if the fantasy I read does relate to real life. I think that there's a point where I really loved like slice of life novels. I don't know. There's something about a literary novel that I haven't been gravitating towards as much. I have shelves full of them, and I haven't been attracted to any of them. So I think that at some point that mood will kind of come back. But at the moment, the idea of picking up a book that's like, I don't really know how to describe it. Just like there's no intrigue in the premise. It's a premise I've heard before, and it might be written great, right? It might have fantastic writing. It might have really dynamic characters. But if at the moment in time, if it doesn't have that intrigue in that plot, that extra something, I have zero interest in reading it right now. And I think because of that, I've been gravitating just more towards fantasy specifically, but genre fiction more generally, because genre fiction usually has to have some sort of hook on it, be that like a genre norm or, something like horror where you're always going to have some sort of hook of what the horror element is. So, yeah, overall, I've had a pretty good reading year. I'll actually pull up the stats really quick. So I've only DNF'd 2 books this year, which is much lower than what I usually do. I don't have the stats on what it usually is, but I will go through just spells of DNFing everything I'm picking up. So I've read 30 books this year. I have 24% of those were rereads, so that was towards the beginning of the year. 24% of my reading for the year has been YA, which is higher than usual, but those were all of the same books that were rereads for me. So all of my rereads for the year were all the YA I read for the year. And then I rate books. I don't put a number to it, I put a feeling to it, but it's basically equivalent to a star system. I just don't like the idea of star numbers. So I have hated, disliked, neutral, liked, and loved. So this is only out of the books that that are not rereads. I don't constitute rereads into this, so it's the 23 books that were new to me. None of them I hated or disliked. 6 of them, so 21% of them, I was neutral about, which means that 79% of them I either liked or loved. I liked 34% of them, and I loved 24% of them, and a majority of those were The Realm of the Elderling. So if I were, which I'm not doing right now, I might do a video on that in the future, but if I were to compare it to years prior, sometimes I don't even have 7 books I loved in a year. And I already have that at the 6-month point. So I've been reading less, but I've been reading longer books, and I've been liking them more, and I've been, at least with The Realm of the Elderling, diving a lot deeper into them as I read them. So yeah, overall, I feel like my reading year has been really great, even if I haven't been here as much to talk about it. Yeah, I've just been having a really great reading year. So I'd be interested to see how other people's reading years are going, or if you take any time within the year to kind of reflect on those things. That's all I have for this video. So until next time, happy reading.